Today I'm going to talk about a different valley, the Sacramento Valley. So I am a consultant with C.H. Drumhill, and I'm a consultant for the California Rice Commission, and this presentation was developed together with them. So before I start, I want to acknowledge my co-authors, and a lot of people worked on this for the last 10 plus years. Roberta is the lead for the Irrigated Lands Program at the California Rice Commission. Bundy and Jenny.Krenz from my office. I've worked on this longer than I have. And then lots of other people worked on this. I want to thank Tim Johnson, the CEO, who's really taken the lead on a lot of this for his industry on the Irrigated Lands Program. John Dickey at Plantera, a lot of C.H. Drumhill staff has worked on this. We worked with Kleinfelder on the field implementation. The USGS folks have been very helpful in providing water quality data, and we also worked with the UC Davis Cooperative Extension and the Rice Research Board at UC Davis on this program. So I'm going to give a brief overview of rice production in California and talk a little bit about the Irrigated Lands Program in general. You've heard a little bit about it already, and then go into the details of the program implementation from the rice industry perspective. This is a broad overview because this is 10 years of work, so it's going to go pretty quick. So California Rice Commission, it's a state statutory organization that was established by the California Food and Agricultural Code. They represent about 2,500 growers that farm and process rice on 500,000 acres of lands in the Sacramento Valley, so north of Sacramento. You can see a little bit down here. Whoops, of course I did what I was not supposed to do. And they engage in all of the regulatory programs in water quality, rice pesticides, et cetera, and engage really between the growers and the regulatory agencies. And what you may not know, California is a big rice grower. There's 2 million tons annually, second largest grower of rice in the U.S. after Arkansas. Export a lot of rice to external markets. The rice grown in the Sacramento Valley is short and medium grain, which is the perfect sushi rice. So if you go to sushi restaurants in California, chances are you're eating rice from this area. And also another key factor is that these rice lands have become really important for migratory birds. When they fly north and south, back and forth through our valley, they rest in the rice lands and find refuge and food when they re-flood the fields in the wintertime. So this gives you now a map perspective. This is agriculture in all of the Sacramento Valley. So the red is the Sacramento metro area. And so you can see that half of the valley, or more than half of the valley, is actually planted in rice. And I'm going to go into why in a little bit. So just a quick recap of the Irrigated Lands Program. It's managed by the state board, managed by 9 regional water quality boards, and you've heard from Angela earlier in Region 3. We are here in Region 5, and we have some representatives in the room, so I got to be careful. There's 13 coalitions in the Central Valley. It's really a decentralized approach where the coalitions are really close to the growers. It's really kind of from the bottom up. There's a lot of collaboration between growers, coalitions, and the regional board. So the goal is to prevent ag discharges from impairing surface water and groundwater. And so the regional board issued a host of discharge orders to each of the coalitions in the valley between 2012 and 2014. The California Rice Commission Coalition is the only commodity-specific program because rice is grown so much different than any other of the ag groups in the valley, and so they're not a geographic-based coalition, but a commodity-based coalition. So quick timeline of activities. The Rice Commission has been taking the lead on a lot of these different early management practices to protect water quality. So between about 2004 to 2010, they were operating like the rest of California agriculture under a conditional waiver. There was some surface water monitoring that was implemented, and they also worked on a rice pesticide program that they took over from the Department of Pesticide Regulation. After that, 2011 to 13, they really helped drive the process and make sure that the Rice Commission gets a program that really works for their growers. Again, rice is grown so much different than all the other crops with being flooded, different soil conditions, et cetera. So they really want to make sure the program works for their growers. They also worked on adding groundwater monitoring, and that's kind of going to be the crux of my talk in the next few slides. So since 2014, the Waste Discharge Order was adopted, including new grower requirements and groundwater quality monitoring. So Sacramento rice lands. So this is a zoom in to the footprint of rice fields. So why rice in California? It's hard to see. There's a squiggly line in the middle. The Sacramento River flows in between rice fields, and historically the river was flooding the valley every winter, creating wetland habitats, discharging a lot of sediments. There's a lot of clay soils, and so this area really is amenable to growing rice because it helps pond the water, and you can't really grow anything else really that well because there's heavy clay soils really don't let the water drain. So that is really why rice is growing in this area and is really the best crop to be grown there. So the practices have been pretty constant since the 80s. Rice has been grown there for about 100 years. Since the 80s, they've really consolidated their practices. They grow them similarly everywhere in the valley. And groundwater quality is very high. It's very good quality, and I'm going to tell you why. So first, before we go into the groundwater quality program, quickly, the surface water quality program started first, and that was based on about 7 monitoring stations throughout the valley. This is, again, the same rice fields, now in green instead of orange. Mix it up. The rice pesticide program nowadays focuses on thiophan carp monitoring. It's a pesticide that's largely used, and it's only registered on rice. So if we monitor that, we know that if there's an impact on surface water, it's from rice, because none of the other crops use that pesticide. And then the Irrigated Lands Program takes over the water quality monitoring for everything else, other pesticides, nutrients, field data, etc. And the monitoring sites, so it's a watershed-based approach where the monitoring sites were defined by a drainage and watershed analysis to make sure that we're able to capture the drainage from the most amount of rain fields. So that it's, we monitor in the canals, in the drains, and also in the Sacramento River. The last point of monitoring is right north, or right at the intake of the city of Sacramento's drinking water, and I drink that water there. So I want to make sure that water is safe to drink. So the groundwater quality program was added, as I mentioned, in 2010. Well, actually in 2014, but the Rice Commission was the only coalition that was proactive and prepared a groundwater quality assessment report that I'm going to refer to as the GAR early on in the process. That is mandated in the order, but we developed it early, and then it was adopted in the order and made sure the groundwater quality requirements are take into consideration all of the data that were collected over the last couple of decades. So for this report, we did a detailed analysis of soil information, root zone studies, groundwater quality, looked at all of the groundwater management projects around the valley, and the recommendations were used in the monitoring and reporting program of the order. So we were kind of already a little bit of a step ahead with the order because we already knew what the data are and what we need to do to continue this program. So here's a cool little graph that's a conceptual model of flow paths of water and nutrients in rice fields. So rice is grown with ponded water on those heavy clay soils. So some of the water will leach down to the groundwater, but probably at a very low rate. Some of it might get perched on those clay layers and then flow back into the drains or into the canals. And then if we look at the more specific root zone conceptual model of nitrate, since nitrate is the main component that the Irrigated Lands Program is looking to regulate, it's very interesting to see what happens in rice fields. So this is not to scale. There's an oxidized, very small, couple-inch layer right in the roots of the rice fields that are kind of oxidized and aerated, but the rest of it gets reduced really quickly because of the clay and the ponding of the water. So we have a lot of denitrification happening under the rice fields, and then the nitrate really doesn't really make it to the shallow groundwater table. It gets denitrified. And a lot of this information, there's a lot of studies done by the UC Cooperative Extension and they were able to show that nitrate really declined quickly, a few tens of centimeters below the root zone. So knowing all of that, kind of understanding the conceptual model of how water and nutrients interact under rice fields, the soil conditions, we embarked on this data collection and analysis to kind of prove that the hypothesis works and that groundwater quality is really not currently a problem the way rice is managed in California, or at least in the Sacramento Valley. So the key features of the groundwater quality data sets that we looked at were to look at proximity to rice, the depth. We looked at shallow, medium, and deep wells. We compared results from nutrients, from salinity, from the pesticides, only the ones registered on rice, and other metals and non-metals. They were compared to drinking water limits. And so this is just results from the nitrate. This is maximum nitrate concentrations from the data sets we had over about 10 years. Those are three major USGS data sets, and you've heard a little bit of USGS networks over the last couple days. So the top USGS rice wells network, we were really fortunate. The USGS with the NACWA program had worked on putting 28 very shallow wells at 50 meters deep, or 50 feet deep, right next to the rice wells, and that really gave us a great information on shallow water quality, first encountered water right next to rice fields. We also looked at domestic wells that are about 100 feet deep, and then the gamma wells are the public supply wells, and they're more about 150 to 200 feet deep. So the results show that there's a lot of green. So green means less than half the MCL. So there's really, the water quality under rice is really good. The only couple of red dots you can see that are above the MCL are actually wells that are in urban areas, and there might be either septic systems or urban influences or other agriculture, but not rice. So with all of this data that we looked at, we're able to look at, like multiple lines of evidence to show that there's low risk of water quality contamination in rice fields. There's no nitrate. It gets denitrified. There's no confirmed pesticide detections in groundwater. And if there's some in surface water, or if the groundwater flows back to surface water, we would be able to see that in a surface water quality monitoring we do. And we haven't seen that either, or just a little bit, but not above drinking water limits. And so the Central Valley Board, the GAR that we prepared, the conclusions aim at designating areas of low or high vulnerability, and because of all of the above, the rice areas were all classified as low vulnerability to surface water and groundwater quality degradation. And that means that the program is a little bit different, the implementation program is a little bit different than if it was high vulnerability. So based on the GAR recommendations, we developed a trend monitoring work plan, because even though we don't have groundwater quality contamination currently, this is a program that goes into the future to make sure that even with future management decisions or actions, water quality won't be degraded. And so we took 20 of the USGS shallow rice wells and put them into the monitoring program. The wells are going to be monitored starting next year, every year, for nitrate and all the other field parameters to make sure that the program still works. So I wanted to briefly talk about the grower management practices. So in addition to the coalition's role in monitoring surface water and groundwater quality, the growers also have a responsibility under this program. So they have to report farming practices and nitrogen management practices. And the Rice Commission developed these websites, so everything that is entered or everything that is reported to the Rice Commission by the grower is electronic. So that was an interesting educational process for them. They have to have an internet connection. They have to log in and fill out all of their information. It's pretty user-friendly, but if you're not used to doing it, it might get daunting. So it's a couple years now, and it's getting better. They actually really liked the internet or the online evaluation forms, because then they can just print it out and it's done, and they don't have to fill out, paperwork. So quickly, the two types of reports or reporting is the farm evaluation and that's management practices, looking at identification of wells on the fields, looking at where the water leaves the property to see if how much of the water might contaminate or might go into the drains into the river. And then the nitrogen management plan is to establish nitrogen versus yield. Because it's a low vulnerability commodity, the nitrogen management is not reported to the regional board. It's just for them to identify practices and make better decisions for themselves, and they have to report it, to print it, and if a regional board member comes and wants to check on their management plans, they need to be able to produce them, but they're not necessarily made available. So the nitrogen management plan is interesting. The way we set it up for the growers, it's basically a management tool for them. There's two sections online. One is a look back at the previous year to make sure they understand how much they put on their fields, how much yield they got out of the nitrogen they put on. And then there is, you know, in the March, April timeframe, when they're getting ready to plant their fields, they can look at, okay, how much nitrogen am I going to put on now, and how much did I get yield of last year? And so it's sort of look back, look in the future, and help them make decisions. So this is my summary slide. The implementation approach is currently working really well. Between surface water quality monitoring and groundwater quality monitoring, there's a lot of grower education going on with web tools, and there's constant research in the rice industry, Northern California, for better practices. You know, UC Davis and Rice Research Board is helping with that. So, any questions? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lisa.
My advisor could not help himself.
Yeah, I know, I was controlling myself. But in your conceptual model, this is sort of interesting. I have never seen that conceptual model before. So it's interesting that your the layer at the bottom really doesn't transmit what water. So it seems like any groundwater pathway should be for the surface systems, and then the surface water infiltrating into the groundwater. Is that correct? So with that, those arrows.
There's some groundwater going down. I mean,
but still the significant flow may be from the rice field to the surface system, and that is going to be infiltrating rather than directly going from the rice field.
Yeah, so correct? there's a error going this is not quantified, right? This has not been quantified. I mean, there's no detailed 3D modeling that we've done on this. So this is just conceptually, yeah, water can go back to the river, come back out. The Sacramento Valley is very connected. There's the surface water and groundwater in some areas is connected, and it varies a lot. In the rice fields with their ponding, it creates that wetland kind of, yeah.
Other questions?
So you said in the start, the source of water for rice was flood from Sacramento River. Is that still the case, or it's more surface water irrigation diverted now?
It's all surface water irrigation. Yes.
Not flooding anymore. It's more.
Oh, it is flooding. Yeah. And so it's the water source, and it's from surface water. They do flood the fields, and then the water gets recycled down field and kind of, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Lisa.